top of the show, I referred to the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, as a right-wing leader. When I said it, I heard myself calling him a left-wing leader, but for some reason I said he was a right-wing leader. My apologies. I misspoke. Lula is the leader of the left-wing Workers' Party in Brazil and has dedicated his life, almost died, for the people. He was jailed for the people. He is most decidedly left-wing. I don't know why I said he's right-wing. My apologies for misspeaking. And again, it is the Electoral Count Act of 1887, not 1867. It is the Electoral Count Act of 1887. If you ever hear me refer to the Electoral Count Act of 1867, what I'm trying to say is the Electoral Count Act of 1887. I don't know what's going on. I'm on pain medication for the kidney stones for some reason. I keep calling it the Electoral Count Act of 1867. It is the Electoral Count Act of 1887. All right. Also, finally, yesterday I butchered the name of one of my heroes, climate activist Greta Thunberg. It's Greta Thunberg, not Marvin Hamlish or Guy Fieri or however I pronounced her name. It's Greta Thunberg, I think. Coming up, Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to sound smart. She tried to give her audience at Turning Points USA a history lesson last week, and instead she gave away the entire game. I'm being serious. It's incredible. She told the audience everything Republicans are not supposed to admit in public. I'll have more on this in a few minutes. It's one of the most incredible crash and burns I've ever witnessed. Some of you might be familiar with Lee Atwater's deathbed confession. Lee Atwater was a right-wing Republican operative cut from the same cloth as Karl Rove. And right after he got George Herbert Walker Bush elected president, he did this by relying on really invidious, racist attack ads, Willie Horton. He ended up with a brain tumor, and as he lay in the hospital, he offered up a famous deathbed confession. You should Google it. You should Google Lee Atwater's deathbed confession. It exposes who the Republicans really are. He says, you can't say the N-word anymore, so you say busing. You can't say you hate black people, so you say food stamps. It's worth looking up. Well, unlike Lee Atwater, Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't have a brain tumor because that would require a brain. But she gave a speech last week and she busted the entire party. It's worse than Lee Atwater's deathbed confession. I'm amazed. I know some of you have already seen this. I'm amazed it's not being blasted all over the internet and that the Democrats haven't put this in everybody's inbox, because as far as I'm concerned, Marjorie Taylor Greene's speech at Turning Points, it's game, set, match for 2024. She exposes who the Republicans are and what they have in store for all of us. Basically, they want us all to starve. I'm not joking around. I'll have more on this incredible confession, an unwitting confession. She was, she's stupid and she was trying to sound smart, and she ended up showing the entire Republicans' hand. It's pretty incredible. I'm going to show it a little later in context. Homeland, by the way, she wants to impeach Joe Biden, and she wants to impeach this guy, Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas, who testified before the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday amid Republican calls for both his resignation and impeachment. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, who never passed the bar despite going to law school. Did I ever mention that Jim Jordan, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, couldn't pass the bar? He went to law school, but he's too stupid. He couldn't pass the bar. Have I ever mentioned that? Anyway, during the hearings, during Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas' testimony, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, who is too stupid to pass his bar exam, even though he went to law school, he berated the Homeland Security Secretary, telling him the border crisis is now the worst it's ever been, adding, quote, "Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie." Well, actually, the number of migrants at the border is the lowest it's been in 2 years. It's down 30% since June alone. Yet numbers don't lie. Jim Jordan does. Jim Jordan does. During his testimony, Mayorkas did admit America's immigration system is broken. It's broken, but only for people who want to come into this country. It's not broken for slaughterhouses, construction firms, and janitorial companies whose entire business models are predicated upon hiring frightened, undocumented workers who won't try to unionize or ask for time and a half when they work extra hours. No, it's not broken for Jim Jordan or the entire Republican Party, who all need to stoke racism, using immigrants as scapegoats for Republican policies that only serve the rich and powerful while destroying the lives of ordinary Americans who are distracted into believing, no, it's the immigrants, it's the migrants, not the rich and powerful. It's the immigrants, it's the migrants who are taking their jobs or destroying our public schools and social safety net. While Republicans secretly try to destroy Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, they spread lies, trying to convince low-information voters that America's social safety net is being exhausted by undocumented immigrants. First off, undocumented immigrants pay into Social Security, which is more than we can say for most Republicans who don't pay their fair share of taxes. Most, if not all, undocumented workers pay into Social Security even though they don't qualify for it. Secondly, as I said, the rich and the powerful are stripping our social safety net clean because they refuse to pay taxes. And even worse, they don't want a social safety net. The Republicans who are in the service of the rich and powerful do not want a social safety net. You're not supposed to say that out loud. And this is Marjorie Taylor Greene saying what you're not supposed to say. Here she is thinking she's smart, but here she is giving away the Republican game. This is absolutely incredible. Many of you saw this last week. But here is Marjorie Taylor Greene giving her audience at Turning Points a history lesson that reveals exactly what the entire Republican thinks and what they want for America, but won't admit it, because how can you admit that you want us to starve? Marjorie?
Lyndon B. Johnson is very similar to Joe Biden. How are they the same?
Well, you know, Marjorie's going to lay some serious knowledge on us because she's putting on her fancy book-smart reading glasses. Please continue, Professor Greene.
They're both Democrat socialists. Lyndon B. Johnson was the majority leader in the Senate. Does that sound familiar?
No, it doesn't sound familiar because Joe Biden was never the Senate majority leader in the Senate. So, and neither one of them were socialists. But please continue, Professor Greene.
He was vice president to Kennedy. Joe was vice president to Obama. He was appointed as the president after JFK was assassinated. Then he was elected. His big socialist programs were the Great Society. The Great Society were big government programs to address education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and welfare, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and big labor and labor unions. Now, LBJ had the Great Society, but Joe Biden had Build Back Better, and he still is working on it. The largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started that LBJ expanded on and Joe Biden is attempting to complete: socialism.
I wish. But wait, now, Marjorie, you say all this like it's a bad thing. You're saying the New Deal, Johnson's Great Society, Medicare, Medicaid. You say this is all bad, and you're saying that Joe Biden wants to be part of this FDR to Lyndon Johnson continuum? You're against this? Which means you and the Republican Party would be against
Education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and welfare, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and big labor and labor unions.
You are not supposed to tell that to everybody, Marjorie. Nobody is supposed to know the Republican Party wants us all to starve. Seriously. You see, Marjorie Taylor Greene is stupid, and she doesn't know how to conceal her weapons. You don't tell people the Republicans want to decimate Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, food stamps, unions, and the social safety net. You're never supposed to say that out loud. You never tell the voters what you're planning. You don't want to give away the ending. It's supposed to be a surprise. You're supposed to tell the American voters that you're trying to save all these programs. That's the game plan. That's the playbook. All these programs you want to destroy, you tell American voters you're trying to save them. And then you get elected saying you're going to save all these programs that Americans undecidedly love. And then when you get into power, you destroy them. You destroy all these programs by telling Americans you're saving them. Republicans are saving Medicare, right? They're doing it right now. They're saving Medicare by convincing unsuspecting Americans to sign up for Medicare Advantage, which is basically privatizing Medicare so the health insurance companies can make more profits by killing grandma and grandpa. If you ever speak to your grandpa and grandma or your mother and father, tell them not to get on Medicare Advantage. The Republicans say we want to save the Veterans Administration by turning it over to privately run health insurance companies so that United Healthcare gets to do to our Vietnam vets what Ho Chi Minh only dreamed of. Marjorie Taylor Greene is unartful, and she cannot keep a secret. She showed the Republican hand. Unlike Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis, who believes all the same things as Marjorie Taylor Greene does. Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, they all want us to starve, but they do it artfully, deceptively. They don't show their hand the way Marjorie Taylor Greene just did. Listen to how Ron DeSantis artfully lies. I mean, frames it. Here he is on Fox telling everyone that he's going to protect Social Security. You don't say you're going to get rid of Social Security. You talk about wanting to protect it. That's how Republicans destroy Social Security, by convincing us they're going to protect it. Mein Führer.
I'm a governor of Florida. Of course we're going to protect people's Social Security. My grandmother passed away when she was 91. That was her sole source of income. And that's true for millions of seniors. And so that goes without saying. So when people say that we're going to somehow cut seniors, so that is totally not true.
See, that's how you do it, Marjorie. You don't admit that you're going to destroy Social Security. No, you're not going to cut Social Security. What he doesn't tell you is no more cost of living increases for grandma and grandpa. But that doesn't mean we're cutting Social Security. It just means Social Security won't be keeping up with inflation. Kind of like the minimum wage. Republicans hate the minimum wage. They can't admit it. They can't admit that they hate the minimum wage. Herschel Walker admitted it. He was running for Senate in Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene's state. When Herschel Walker was running for Senate in Georgia last year, he let it slip that he wants to get rid of the minimum wage because Republicans hate the minimum wage. And I kept playing that clip. I can't believe it didn't just spread across the internet. Herschel Walker, Republican Senate candidate last year, admitted we want to get rid of the minimum wage, but you can't say that. So what you do is what the Republicans have been doing since 2009. You kill the minimum wage through inflation. And this is exactly how they're going to kill Social Security. What you do to Social Security is what the Republicans have done to the minimum wage. They have killed the minimum wage. We do not have a minimum wage in America, even though everybody thinks we have one. The minimum wage has not been raised in 14 years. Minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Let me repeat, minimum wage in America is $7.25 an hour, which means if you're, a single dad, a single mom, and you work a 40-hour week and want to spend some time with your family, if you work a 40-hour week, do the math, you end up with $290 a week. Hasn't been raised. Minimum wage has not been raised since July 24th, 2009. It's been almost exactly 14 years since the minimum wage was raised. And that's how Republicans killed the minimum wage. We still have a minimum wage, but Republicans who've always hated the minimum wage since Franklin Roosevelt came up with it, Republicans succeeded in destroying the minimum wage by not allowing it to be raised. They will never admit they want to destroy the minimum wage. They let inflation do their dirty work. $290 a week if you work 40 hours. But they insist you can't raise the minimum wage. It will cause inflation. That's what they want us to believe. And the same thing is with Social Security. They're not going to destroy Social Security the same way they haven't destroyed Medicare for All. I mean, they're not going to get rid of it. They're just not going to give you a cost of living income. What they say is, and they're being honest, we're not going to touch Social Security for grandma and grandpa. If you're 71, I promise you, we're not going to touch your Social Security. And they're telling the truth. The same way they haven't touched the minimum wage. Whatever you're making today, you will make 20, 30, 40 years from now. We're not touching it. It's safe. What they mean is no cost of living adjustment. We're not going to touch your Social Security. That's what they're telling the seniors in Florida. Grandma, grandpa, if you're getting, I don't know, what is it, $1,800 a month today, we're not touching it. We promise in 30, 40 years, you will still be making $1,800 a month. We're not touching your Social Security. But see how artful the Republicans are, thanks to people like Frank Luntz, who all of a sudden, by the way, Frank Luntz is worried about climate change. The guy who reintroduced the term climate change into our vocabulary because it sounded more anodyne than climate destruction. All of a sudden, Frank Luntz and his toupee are worried about climate catastrophe. I could tell you things about Frank Luntz that would shock you. Like, that's not a toupee. That's not a toupee. That's the shocking. No, I could tell you things about Frank Luntz. Well, let's go back to the artful Ron DeSantis. This is how he addressed grandma and grandpa to assure them we're not touching your Social Security the same way we're not touching Medicare for all. But what about the millennials, right? Here we go. Here he is addressing the millennials.
Talking about making changes for people in their 30s or 40s so that the program's viable, that's a much different thing, and that's something that I think that there's going to need to be discussions on.
Yeah, we need to have discussions on making Social Security viable for people in their 30s and their 40s. Here's how to make Social Security viable for people in their 30s, their 40s, even for people who haven't been born yet. Leave it alone. Leave Social Security alone and have cost of living adjustments. Social Security is already viable. It's never in trouble. It's a lie when they say it's in trouble. Social Security works. It works. But what Ron DeSantis and the Republicans want to do, besides starve us to death, what they want to do is privatize Social Security, turn it over to Wall Street, because he and his corporate cronies see this big pile of cash sitting in Social Security. And, sometimes the federal government borrows from Social Security when we're running a budget deficit. That's how unviable Social Security is. The federal government sometimes borrows from Social Security. It drives Republicans crazy to see a pile of cash sitting there that they can't get their hands on, and they want their skim. I'm not exaggerating. This is the truth. They want their taste of that, the same way they want their taste of Medicare through Medicare Advantage. There's all this money that they see sitting there at Medicare, which works perfectly fine compared to private health insurance. They see this pile of cash, our tax dollars sitting there, and people like Ron DeSantis and George W. Bush, when he tried to privatize Medicare, they think, why should this go to the people who paid into it? What about no-talent Wall Street charlatans? Shouldn't they be able to take a 20 to 30% skim off the top, the way health insurance companies do? Shouldn't young people, when it comes to Medicare or Social Security, shouldn't young people shouldn't it be privatized so they can be talked into playing with their Social Security money or their Medicare savings account by making risky investments that, getting egged on by idiot stockbrokers, telling them to bet their retirement on collateralized debt obligations? What could possibly go wrong? See, the people who donate to Ron DeSantis, who donate to Marjorie Taylor Greene, the people who run Turning Points USA, they hate the American people. You think I'm exaggerating? I'm not. They hate the American people. They want us to starve. They don't want a social safety net. They don't want people in their 60s, 70s, or 80s retiring. They want grandma and grandpa working till they drop. And, grandma and grandpa, they're not going to work till they drop if Medicare and Social Security takes away all their worries. See, Republicans depend on keeping grandma and grandpa and all of us in a permanent state of terror. So those immigrants at the border, crawling through barbed wire, who are being denied drinking water in triple-digit heat, being thrown back into the Rio Grande and told to swim back to Mexico. The way Greg Abbott and the Republicans in Texas treat those migrants is exactly how they treat citizens of the United States who aren't billionaires. There is no difference. If you're not a billionaire, all right, let's say $20 million. If you don't have $20 million, Ron DeSantis and Texas Governor Greg Abbott and pretty much the entire Republican Party, they see no difference between you and a pregnant migrant woman sitting in a for-profit detention center with no air conditioning. If you're not worth a couple of $1 million, you're just a natural resource to be mined for cheap labor. You're supposed to work just enough so the ruling class, the billionaires, can saddle you with just enough credit card debt that you end up paying the rich and the powerful instead of it being the other way around. You work to pay the rich and powerful, to pay off your debts, your credit card debt, your student loan debt, your auto loan debt. This is how it works in America. It was set up back when Reagan deregulated the financial sector. This is the way it works, and this is the way it works. The rich and the powerful pay Americans just enough, right? $7.25 an hour, minimum wage. Americans they get paid just enough. And whatever they earn, they pay back to the credit card companies. And of course, the landlords. Rent, right? It goes to rent and the credit cards. Since Reagan, the plan has been to keep Americans in debt and pay them just enough money so they can service the debt, so they can kind of pay their rent. Landlords, they don't want you able to afford a home. They want you renting. The banks and the credit card companies want you making just enough money so that you think you can afford it by putting it on your credit card when in fact you can't afford it. And by the time you pay that purchase off, you've ended up paying, because of the interest tacked on, you've ended up paying 3 times as much for what it originally cost. Every time I try to buy a pair of pants, cheap pants or cheap shirt, every time I go into, say, the Gap or a Banana Republic, the first thing they say to me as they're ringing me up is, you want to take out a credit card? They cannot wait to give me a credit card. And they'll say, we'll give you a 20% discount on top of the 40% discount we're already giving you on this shirt. Do you know why the pants are so cheap at the Gap and the Banana Republic? Partly because they're made in a sweatshop in Bangladesh, but mostly because the department stores trick you into taking out a credit card, because they know if you buy those pants on credit, by the time you end up paying those pants off, that $20 pair of pants, that great bargain, will end up costing you $60. They tack on enough interest. You think you're getting a bargain. How do they do it? How do they sell you a pair of pants for $20? Because it's going to take you 4 years to pay it back, and those pants end up costing you $60. Give Americans just enough money at their jobs, and of course a line of credit, so they think they can afford it. Have, Alec Baldwin and Tina Fey doing commercials for credit. Have Samuel Jackson, people we love, doing credit cards, commercials for credit cards. We trust Alec Baldwin, Tina Fey, and Samuel Jackson. Why would they lie to us? Why would they want to get us into a perpetual cycle of debt? And what happens is you get tricked into buying that $20 pair of pants, thinking you're being smart, and 3 years later it's $60. And whose fault is it? Not Visa's, not MasterCard's, not Tina Fey, Alec Baldwin's, or Samuel Jackson's. It's your fault. You're the one who's irresponsible, right? People in debt, it's always their fault. The ruling elite has this down to a science. They trick the American people. They force the American people to work for $290 a week. But there are things we desperately need. There are things they convince us we desperately need, but then there are things we really do desperately need. Food, rent, clothing, forget recreation. You need daycare and, of course, health insurance. So, what do? Especially when your kid gets sick. You do what every American does. Not every American, only the Americans I care about. You do what every American does. You put it on your credit card, right? $290 a week. You got a sick kid. You go without food, right? And you put your kid's insulin on a credit card. That's what we do here in America, the richest country in the history of civilization. The billionaires, the ruling class, Republicans more so than Democrats, but never forget that Joe Biden is from Delaware, which is, credit card central. The ruling class, they are literally mining the American people. Mining them. They are drilling the American people for money. They're getting American people to work pretty much for free. I hate to trivialize slavery. I want to be careful here, but getting paid $290 a week, I would have to crunch the numbers. I suspect owning a slave in the antebellum South, and I don't mean to be disrespectful here, but I suspect it was more expensive in real dollars than $290 a week to own a slave. I don't know. Well, they work for free, but isn't $290 a week kind of working for free? And Walmart and McDonald's aren't providing housing the way I want to be careful here, but if you're making $290 a week, which is what minimum wage here is in America, you're working for free. And whatever money you do earn, you're paying it to the banks to maintain your line of credit, you're paying it to the health insurance companies, and you're paying it to the landlords. It is neo-feudalism. End-stage capitalism. We all thought, it's going to lead to communism. No, end-stage capitalism leads to neo-feudalism. This is not me, trying to be cute. Look around. All this goes hand in hand with the authoritarian playbook that Project Democracy has put out, and I've been quoting. This is how it's going. This is the truth. This is the truth. I'm not being cute here. Those migrants at the border that Ron DeSantis tricked into taking a flight, they tricked them into a plane ride to Martha's Vineyard. Those migrants, Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, ships to New York and California. Those migrants are you and me. Those migrants are you and me. The people who own this country don't care if those migrants down along the Rio Grande die from heat stroke in an unventilated for-profit detention center as long as that for-profit detention center turns a profit. They don't care about the migrants. They think they deserve to die. You've seen that, right? You hear the reports of Greg Abbott telling Texas State Border Patrol to deny these people water in triple-digit weather. They don't care. The same way they don't care if you and I die because, they don't care if you say we're being ripped off by the health insurance companies. They're killing us. They don't care. My insulin is too expensive. I'm starving to death to pay for my child's insulin. They don't care. Guns, they don't care. They want gun manufacturers to sell more guns. There is no difference between those migrants at the border and you and me because Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis, who work for the people who own America, they don't care if we live or die. That's not an exaggeration. They don't care if we live or die. The same way our government is more than willing to give arms to any country that needs it, and they don't care who lives or dies so long as other countries are keeping our economy afloat by buying our cluster bombs. They do not care if we live or die. If they did, we'd have Medicare for all. They'd raise the minimum wage. We're just a source of cheap labor. Our job is to rack up student loan debt. Buy the lie that going to college will, increase your earning power. Rack up student loan debt, credit card debt. Don't deny yourself anything. You deserve stuff that you don't need. And of course, you have to have a car in America because mass transit is purposely non-existent. So you have to buy a car to work. So you have to take out car loans. What are car loans now? Or $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion student loan debt, trillion, maybe 2 trillion credit card debt. How many trillions is credit card debt? And that's what keeps Wall Street humming along. Because we don't make anything really here in America. I mean, we make some things, but what we really do, something like 35% of Our economy is finance, which makes nothing. It just trades debt. That's our job as Americans, to keep Wall Street humming along. If you think I'm overstating the problem, union membership is at the lowest it's been in more than a century. We keep hearing about these strikes, right? SAG-AFTRA, Writers Guild, Starbucks, Amazon. Starbucks and Amazon has yet to recognize the unions, even though they're in violation of the National Labor Relations Act. Doesn't matter. Starbucks, Amazon, they own the government. Who's going to prosecute them? But we keep hearing about union activism here in America when, in fact, union membership here in America is the lowest it's been in a century. Okay? The minimum wage is $290 a week. In real dollars, we're asking Americans, or at least the Americans I care about, in real dollars to live on like what people it's like it hasn't been raised in real dollars since like 1947. 40% of Americans who work for a living, who have health care, say, yeah, I have health care, but I can't afford to use it. You think it's an exaggeration when I say they don't care if you live or die? They don't. They would fix climate change if they cared if you live or die. Whatever means more money for them, that's all they care about. Because they're immune as far as they're concerned. They're off on their island. They're immune to all this. And just out of sight, out of mind, they do not care if we live or die. If keeping you alive means you'll pay rent, make the minimum payments on your credit cards, and work the cash register at Walmart without trying to unionize, then yeah, go ahead and live. But if you get sick and start cutting into the profits for United Healthcare, then please die. Please go die. Whatever you're suffering from, please just leave us alone and die, because we're a for-profit company. We're United Healthcare, and if we keep you alive, that cuts into our profits. So please die. If you're a 7-year-old elementary school student in Texas who gets in the way of an assault weapon firing off 60 rounds in 30 seconds, please die. Please. Please don't eat into the profits of Marty Daniel, the CEO of Daniel Defense, because his profits come first. That's not, I'm not being artful here. This is the truth. As you get older, you begin to meet certain people, right? You have friends who become you realize that the people at the top in the Republican Party do not care if we live or die. When you look at Nixon and Kissinger planning to bomb the mines of North Vietnam, they're being told 1 million people are going to die. And Nixon's saying on tape, I can't be the first president to lose a war. Let's bomb the mines. Kissinger and Nixon were going to go ahead with that. And then the protest movement made it impossible. That's for another discussion. By the way, Henry Kissinger is 100 years old. Even Satan doesn't want Henry Kissinger. The Republicans, the richest 1%, they want the vast preponderance of Americans to be as frightened and pliable and compliant as undocumented workers, because America, since its founding, has always been about one thing and one thing only: free labor. First, it was the indentured servants, but they got freed after 7 years, so then it was the slaves, the African slaves. This country was built on free labor, and it continues to thrive on free labor, If you think I'm exaggerating, you're an effing moron. The minimum wage has not been raised since 2009. It is $7.25 an hour. Republicans, they can't wait to use the word free. What they really mean is they want you and me to work for free, which is why the immigration crisis will never be solved, because the last thing the rich and the powerful want, the last thing the Republicans who do the dirty work of the rich and powerful, the last thing the Republicans want is for Americans to realize who's actually responsible for our crumbling infrastructure, lousy public schools, and of course our crappy health care. It isn't the undocumented workers. It's the people hiring the undocumented workers to build their second, third, and fourth vacation homes. Their business model, the business model of the rich and powerful here in America, is to bring these undocumented migrants in, keep them terrified, keep them frightened, so they work. No unions. And of course, there's wage theft. They want these migrants. They say they don't. They want these migrants because wage theft is the business model here in America. And it is so easy to steal the wages of someone who's terrified you're going to call ICE. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, for some reason, has not been arrested for insider trading. Look that one up. He's a Trump appointee, and Biden kept him on. Fed Chair Jerome Powell on Wednesday raised interest rates to the highest level in 22 years. This is now the 11th time since 2022 that Jerome Powell has lifted interest rates. But inflation is now down to 3%. You wouldn't know that if you watch Fox News or listen to the Republicans, but inflation has been tamed. It's down to 3%. But Powell, Fed Chair Powell, says he won't be satisfied until inflation is down to 2% as he desperately tries to kickstart a recession that will leave millions of Americans out of work, clamoring for jobs, and willing to do anything for whatever the boss will pay him. This is the plan. Drive up interest rates, suffocate the economy, so management can say, hey, we were so close to giving you a raise and recognizing this union and raising the minimum wage, but look at the economy. Now is not the right time. Look at the economy. We're in a recession. We can't recognize a union or give you a raise or pay a livable wage, make the minimum wage a livable wage, because it's never the right time to give Americans a raise. Never. It is in other countries, not here in the richest country in the history of civilization. Rising interest rates now means the credit card debt Americans hold will become even more expensive, right? You owe money on your credit card. What are you paying? 18, 19%? Now it goes up to 20, 22, sometimes 33%. I saw my credit card statement. They said, I was reading the terms of the credit card. It can go as high as something like 35%, unless you're a veteran, in which case it's only 29%. You know, nothing like patriotism, right? We're only going to gouge you at 29%. I think you can get a better deal from the Gambino family than you can from MasterCard. So he's raising interest rates, which means credit card debt that Americans hold becomes even more expensive. And that's great news for Visa, MasterCard, the banks, Banana Republic, which wants me to take out a card. Because it doesn't cost them more money when they lend it. They get to rack up more profits. They get to charge more for the money. And if you do have money, for the first time in a long time, you can actually collect more than 5% interest by putting your extra cash into a savings account, which is great news for all the douchebags who have savings accounts. Because that's who Jerome Powell is working for. Half this country can't come up with $1,000 for an emergency. Half this country doesn't have $1,000 in liquid cash for an emergency. So you think most Americans, or at least the Americans I care about, you think most Americans give a rat's ass about being able to get higher interest rates in a savings account? The 100 million Americans who could vote but don't. There are 100 million Americans who could vote but don't. You think right now they're saying, "Hey, that's great. I can get 5% buying a certificate of deposit over at Chase." No, they don't care, which is why they stay home on Election Day. 100 million people here in America stay home on Election Day because Jerome Powell, the unelected chairman of the Federal Reserve, controls our financial destiny, and he ain't working for the 100 million Americans who stay home on Election Day. He's working for the banks, and only for the banks, because the Federal Reserve is a bank, and Jerome Powell is a banker. When the Fed raises interest rates, it benefits the credit card companies and rich people who need a safe place to hoard their cash. This was never about bringing down inflation. It's about bringing down wages even lower, if such a thing is possible. I don't know if you can get it below $290 a week, $7.25 an hour. It is the job of Jerome Powell to slow the economy, to create more debt. When you slow the economy, that creates more debt for the government, more debt for consumers. And that's his job, create debt, because banks and Wall Street and our government, they make money. They literally make money. They create more money by creating debt. So let's talk. How much time do I have left? All right, let's talk about inflation. There's a term out there called greedflation. Greedflation. I love that term. I told you a year ago, at the height of this inflation, that there was a very simple way to determine whether inflation is being caused by supply chain issues, COVID, the war in Ukraine, and of course, government spending. We always got to hear how government spending, the social safety net, creates inflation. Republicans can't wait to spread that canard. Or is inflation being caused by greedy companies using the specter of inflation? Everybody's talking about inflation, so let's raise prices. Let's just raise prices. And there's a very easy way to find out whether or not it's greedflation. We're all economically illiterate. We don't know how to read a spreadsheet or a financial statement, so we think we can't prove whether or not greedflation actually exists, but it does. I said to you a year ago, pay attention to earnings season. Every 3 months, all the corporations that are publicly traded have to open up the books and tell us how much they made and what they were charging. And nobody pays attention to this. They don't want us to. But if you paid attention to this, if we weren't economically illiterate, we would know that Jerome Powell is an effing liar and that we are seeing greedflation. That the 3%, which isn't so bad, doesn't justify raising interest rates again and punishing the 99%. The inflation we're seeing is greed. It is greed. It's why Biden, instead of having Jerome Powell raise interest rates, Biden should step up and do wage and price freezes the way Nixon did. Right? But, can't do that because that would actually help the 100 million people who could vote but don't vote. The last thing the people who control our government want is the 100 million Americans to think they have some skin in the game, right? You institute wage and price freezes, keep interest rates low. 100 million people who don't vote are suddenly going to go, hey, this government works for me. I'm going to get involved. That would be bad news for the ruling class. So pay attention to earnings seasons. It's if companies are reporting record profits during inflation, that means they're profiting off inflation. I told you this a year ago. If a company reports record profits during a period of high inflation, it means inflation is caused by greed. That means they're using inflation to get away with raising prices, right? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Everybody thinks there's inflation. I might as well raise prices. So if you look at earnings season this past quarter and a couple quarters, the quarter before that, you're seeing record profits, if not record profits, incredible profits. And during the earnings calls that the CEOs of these companies make to investors, a lot of these CEOs, when they're boasting about their record profits, they love to talk about something called pricing power. Pricing power. And that sounds good to investors, pricing power. But what pricing power actually means is I, as the CEO of the company, bought up the competition. We either have a monopoly or duopoly, and we can pretty much get away with charging whatever we want because consumers have nowhere else to go. That's what pricing power means. So you want to bring down inflation. You think 3% is too much? Leave the interest rates alone and break up all these big companies. Make it smaller. Make it so smaller companies have to compete for your business. And what's the number one way a company competes for your business? Lowering prices. No. Republicans, Jerome Powell. Actually, Jerome Powell doesn't say inflation is caused by government spending. His one saving grace, Jerome Powell has said that the government spending that went on during and after COVID, well, COVID is still going on, but he said the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, nothing to do with inflation. That's his one saving grace, telling the truth about that. But, Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, the Republicans are liars who really do want us to starve to death. They want to get rid of the social safety net. And they will lie and say all this government spending that Joe Biden has initiated with, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, they lie and say this Keynesian economics is creating inflation. It's not true. And even Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, said so. Doesn't matter. Republicans and corporate Democrats will say anything to justify getting rid of the social safety net, making us starve so that we're frightened and desperate. Because when everyone is starving, when everyone is frightened and desperate, we do what we're told. This is the truth. They want us to starve. Please, sir, may I have some more? Please, sir? Please, can I have some more? Thank you. The New York Times, for example, if you think I'm just, filling time here, the New York Times on Wednesday reported that companies in the consumer brand sector are now reporting record profits while at the same time raising prices. This is greedflation. Why are they raising prices? Read the article in the New York Times. Why are they raising prices? Because they have pricing power. They have the pricing power to charge what they want because they bought up all the competition. There are no supply chain issues anymore. This isn't about shortages of commodities due to COVID or the war in Ukraine. This is about CEOs realizing that Americans think inflation is a real thing, so we can jack up the price of things and blame inflation. Blame the inflation on government spending. We have to charge you more for M&Ms because Joe Biden wants the bridges to stay up. They don't want the double-deck highways pancaking your parents, so you're going to have to pay more for M&Ms. That's what they're basically saying, right? It's not true. It's not greed. That's not, we have record profits, but it's not greed. It's working for these companies. For Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Unilever, for example, these are multinational food conglomerates that make garbage food that causes diabetes, strokes, cancer, and heart disease, not to mention having an enormous carbon footprint by making us rely on dairy products and plastic, right? Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Unilever, they make all the things that are killing us, except tobacco. Maybe they own a tobacco company. I wouldn't be surprised. If Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or Unilever makes it, don't buy it. It's bad for your heart, your kidneys, your blood sugar, and of course the planet. But they figured out a way to get you addicted to all their shit by finally calibrating just the right combination of sugar, fat, and salt so that you can't help yourself. And because you can't help yourself, because you're addicted to this shit, you'll pay whatever they charge. These Ganoffs at Unilever raised their prices by 8% just this last quarter, 8%. The pigs at Pepsi raised their prices by 15% last quarter. Coke raised its prices. And by the way, you'll notice there's less in the bag. They raised the prices and there's less in the bag. Guess what happened after they raised their prices? There's a way to prove greedflation. They have to report their profits. Record profits. Profits are skyrocketing. Coke says its profits last quarter were up 33% over the same quarter a year ago. Unilever's profits are up 20% over the same quarter a year ago. Pepsi says its profits doubled over a year ago. And guess what? Profits are at record highs, but that doesn't necessarily mean more people are buying this crap. They're just paying more for it. If we weren't financially illiterate, we could read their earnings reports and learn this, that people may be buying less of this crap, but the profits are up because they're charging more for it. That's why the oil companies made so much money last year. They just doubled the prices. They realized that the oil companies said, what are we drilling for oil for? Let's just charge more for it. So they stopped drilling for oil and just raised prices. Drill, baby, drill? No. You can make more money by creating an artificial scarcity and just charging more for oil. This crap, if you can sell something that people are addicted to, like tobacco, oil, or crappy food, the sky's the limit in what you can charge. Cigarettes, Coca-Cola, Doritos, they're poison. And the only way these companies can get you to buy this toxic sludge is by making you crave it. They manipulate the sugar, the fat, the salt so that receptors in our brain crave this, the same way we crave heroin. It lights up the same spot in our brain. Nicotine, heroin, sugar, salt, and fat lights up the same parts of our brains that heroin does. This isn't some crazy conspiracy theory. It's called food science. It's science. Americans go to college to learn how to do this stuff. How do I make something that has no nutritional value, that is cheap to produce, but Americans will become convinced that they can't live without it because they're addicted to it? People earn degrees in food science. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is food science. There are people who earn PhDs rearranging carbohydrates at a molecular level to turn sugar, salt, and fat into heroin. That's where the money is, getting Americans addicted to something that will kill them. Coca-Cola can't beat the real thing, right? The real thing. It's the real thing. Really? It's real? Coca-Cola is real. It's probably as real as inflation instead of greedflation. Coca-Cola, as you all know, is the original gangster when it comes to manipulating your taste buds to trick your kidneys into craving this poison. It used to be that cocaine was in Coke. You all know that. It's the last time Coke was honest about the product. But the government stopped that. So Coke had to figure something else out, and they began marketing Coke as a thirst quencher. Right? It used to be a medicine, but then they had to take the cocaine out, and they said, how can we sell this shit? Let's call it a thirst quencher. And how can we sell a lot of it? Well, we have to sell people a thirst quencher that makes them thirstier. They market Coke as cool, refreshing. They convince you that it's going to quench your thirst. But if you're stupid enough, self-destructive enough, sadly addicted enough, you will notice that the more Coca-Cola you drink, the thirstier you become. Why is that? Food science, not a conspiracy theory, science. The geniuses at Coke have fine-tuned the right combination of salt and sugar so that we have no idea that when we're drinking Coca-Cola, we're actually drinking salt water. It's kind of, it's almost admirable. We have no idea that Coca-Cola is salt water, which makes us thirstier. And sugar disguises the taste of salt. Okay? Oversalt your food to the point where it's inedible, and then add sugar, and you can eat it. 1 can of Coke has 39 grams of sugar, and that's a lot of sugar. Nobody's craving that much sugar. So why is all this sugar in Coca-Cola? Because you need that much sugar to cover up the 45 milligrams of salt, right? It's about the salt to make you thirstier. They want you drinking more than 1 can of Coke when you're thirsty. And the way they do that is they put salt in the Coke and then cover the taste of salt up with lots and lots of sugar. They call it sodium. I guess that sounds a little more thirst quenching. Sodium sounds better than salt. They put just enough salt in Coke and then flood your taste buds with sugar so you can't taste the salt, and you have no idea that you're drinking salt water. You have no idea why, no matter how many cans of Coke you keep drinking, you keep getting thirstier. So here's the truth. If you want to save money, if you want to lose weight, don't listen to me. I have no idea. But here's a good idea. And check with your doctor, check with a nutritionist. Never get medical advice from me or anybody other than a doctor. So ask a doctor or a nutritionist about what I'm about to tell you. Drink water. I wish I could do that, but I have too many temptations. But if you only drink water, you will live forever. Drink water. When it comes to hydration, and now check with a doctor first, because I'm an idiot. But the only thing you need is water. Everything else, when it comes to hydration, everything else, from juice to Gatorade, it's poison. You don't need juice. You don't need smoothies. All you need is water. If you eat fresh fruits and vegetables, all you should be drinking is water, period. Anything more than water, and check with a nurse, check with a nutritionist, check with a doctor. But I'm telling you, if you're eating fruits and vegetables, anything other than water is extraneous. But we're not supposed to say that because Pepsi and Unilever and Coca-Cola, these three multinational conglomerates, they make trillions. Over a 10-year period, we're talking about trillions of dollars selling you soda, energy drinks, chips, and ice cream that are just as dangerous, if not more so, than tobacco. And everyone knows this. Heart disease, diabetes, cancer, obesity. It's all caused primarily by sugar, salt, and fat. Yes, tobacco plays a huge role in cancer and heart disease, lack of exercise, and of course, pollution. But the American diet, sugar, salt, and fat, they are the iron triangle of America's food industry. They are the iron triangle that decreases our life expectancy. Like tobacco, you know how they manipulated the nicotine levels so you would smoke more cigarettes? The people who run Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Unilever, they have manipulated the salt, the fat, the sugar to get us all addicted to something that kills us, the same way the tobacco industry manipulated the nicotine. And because we're addicted to this stuff and they buy up the competition, they can charge whatever they want, and they do. You can't beat the real thing. That's what Coca-Cola says. Well, they're trying to convince us that inflation is real. It's not. It's greed. It's just greed. Record profits means rising prices, greed. Ben & Jerry's, the politically correct ice cream, all about peace, love, and rainbows. Don't forget diversity, equity. Bernie Sanders, Vermont, save the planet. Oh, how they want to save the planet. Ben & Jerry's, good company, corporate responsibility. No, they sold out. There is no Ben & Jerry's. It's owned by Unilever. Ben & Jerry's is now just smoke and mirrors. It's just an exercise in branding. They're mass marketing an idea that no longer exists. And it didn't exist when we thought it existed. Ben & Jerry's, their heart was never in the right place. You can't have your heart in the right place if what you are selling causes heart disease. Who are we kidding here? Ice cream is poison. And yes, I'm a lot of fun at parties. Please invite me to your party so I can comment on the hors d'oeuvres and why it's bad for you and the planet. I'm a lot of fun to be around. Who are we kidding about ice cream? It's poison, it's sugar, it's fat, it's salt, and more importantly, it's dairy, which is one of the primary sources of greenhouse gases. cow belches, not cow farts, by the way, cow belches. It's not the cows farting, it's their belches. They're belching up methane, the most intractable of all greenhouse gases. Methane, we didn't know that until recently, but methane, it's what's heating up the planet. And that's what those cows, from Ben & Jerry's, Peace, Love, Save the Planet, all this ice cream, those cows that keep Ben & Jerry's and ice cream, they're producing methane, and it's killing us. Even worse, dairy farms are the most sadistic of all factory farms. So your ice cream comes from a dairy farm, and we always think, oh, it can't be that bad. It's a dairy farm in Vermont. Ron Howard owns a place in Vermont. Dairy farms are the most sadistic of all factory farms. When a cow gives birth, the first thing they do is they check to see if it's a boy or a girl. And if it's a boy, that means it's going to be a bull. And factory farms don't want bulls. Bulls are problematic. They don't know how to behave in a workplace. They're violent, and nobody needs their semen. There was a time when we all needed a bull semen, not anymore. Factory farms pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for world-class, state-of-the-art bull semen from Chile and Argentina. They don't need the semen from some schleppy bull from Arkansas who's been raised on antibiotics and Monsanto's weed killer. Here's a fact. Most veal comes from young male calves of dairy breeds, which are not used for breeding. Let me repeat this. When you eat veal, what you're eating most of the time is a young male calf, which is not being used for breeding. When a cow gives birth to a boy, a bull, a baby bull, the first thing the factory farm says is, kill it, murder it, it's a boy. But that's too brutal, so they scream veal. That sounds better, veal. We've got ourselves veal. When you eat veal, you're eating a baby boy cow. Think about that. You're eating a baby boy cow. Not only that, but they also ripped that baby boy from the mother, and she's, I don't know if she watches it get slaughtered, but they start squeezing her udders for the milk. All that milk that's supposed to go to the baby boy cow who's been turned into veal, the factory farms just keep pumping the mommy's udders to produce milk while she's crying. The mommy is crying, missing her baby who's been slaughtered for veal. And they just keep pumping her udders. By the way, this is what I told my kids while they were growing up. These were bedtime stories that I would read to my kids. And they're now vegan. They don't talk to me anymore, but they are vegan. These are actual stories. I'm not joking around. My kids are vegan, and this is what I told them before Child Protective Services came and took them away. Your kids need to know this about veal and dairy. The baby boy cow is ripped from the mother, and then they just start squeezing the mommy's udders to produce milk that's not going to go to the baby cow because he's dead, he's veal. And instead, that milk is used to produce milk, yogurt, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and cheese. It was supposed to go to the baby, but the baby's now dead. And the mothers, whose udders are being squeezed for the milk, she's sad and depressed because you ate her baby boy. That's what ice cream is. That's what ice cream is. You got to kill baby boys to get ice cream. Now, vegetarians like me who eat dairy think, well, it's less cruel than actually killing a cow or eating a steak. Turns out, we're deluding ourselves here, because I am a vegetarian and I do eat cheese. And when I'm angry and I want to lash out at the world, I punish myself by eating ice cream, because it's safer. You don't get arrested when you're angry if you punish yourself, right? Eat ice cream, punish yourself instead of lashing out at the world. That way you don't end up in jail. Turns out, sadly, eating cheese, eating ice cream, just as bad as eating a steak, maybe more cruel. Because did I mention that dairy from factory farms comes from mommy cows whose baby boys were ripped away from them and then slaughtered? And then they milk the mommy cow. They take all the milk that was supposed to go to the baby boy cow, and instead they turn it into ice cream and climate catastrophe. Did I ever mention that to you? They keep the females because you can inseminate them and, get more dairy out of them. But if you're a baby boy, if you're a baby bull, you're veal. There's your lesson on inflation, folks. You should invite me to a party. I am great at dinner parties, because if you think I don't talk this way at dinner parties, you're sorely mistaken, which is why I'm all alone in this world. I am a vegetarian. I'll be honest with you. I'm a vegetarian. And I would say on a good week, 5 to 6 days out of the week, I'm vegan. But when you're traveling and you're hungry and you're tempted, sometimes cheese is the only answer. I'm no saint. Probably better than most of you. But I'm no saint. I didn't mean to be arrogant, but I do kind of believe that the measure of a human being is whether or not they're vegan, and I fall short. Nobody's better than anybody, unless you're a vegan. Like my friend Mark Thompson, he's like a full bore vegan, and he's better than I am. If you're a vegan, if you're 100% completely vegan, if it's just a plant-based diet, if there's no death in your system, you are morally, intellectually, and physically superior to everyone else. That's how I take the measure of a human being. It really does start with what you ingest. You can say, you're against the oil companies, but what's your diet? Are you a vegan? Because you're just as bad. That's the inconvenient truth about climate change. You shouldn't be recycling. That's bullshit. Switch to a plant-based diet. Recycling's bullshit. I'll talk about that. I've known that for decades. Plant-based diet is the answer. If you can go a year eating nothing but plants, you are on a higher evolutionary rung than everybody else. And I love my Republican friends who say, I love the taste of meat. I can't help it. It's my ancestors. You go back, this is what they say, you go back 50,000 years, our ancestors ate meat. It's human nature to eat meat. To which I reply, usually at a party, when people says, when I'm ruining a steak dinner, and they go, hey, it's human nature. Our ancestors ate meat. And I say, you know what? You're right. By the way, your wife is very attractive. Do you mind if I club her over the head and rape her where they keep the coats? While you're talking, do you mind if I just club your wife over the head, drag her to where the coats are being kept, and rape her? Because that's human nature too. I mean, that's when you were eating meat 50,000 years ago, that was what people did. Is it okay with you? And I have said that at parties. I've said that at parties. Societies evolve and people evolve. Hopefully we're not the same people we were 50,000 years ago. People evolve. Some of us do. Maybe I should try evolving and learning to keep my mouth shut at work or at parties where nobody wants to hear my bullshit. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. By the way, that is not a Neanderthal. That is Kellyanne Conway sans hair and makeup. I'm not being cruel. That's the truth. You're not allowed to make fun of the way a woman looks, so I would never do that. That just happens to be a photograph of Kellyanne Conway sans hair and makeup. Hi, please like this video. Please, I'm feeling better. Please like the video. Please subscribe to my channel. Please share this with your friends. Maybe not the last half hour. There seems to be a trend here where the last half hour gets really horrific, and I think it's going to get worse. I think the last half hour of my shows, I figure if you've been listening this long, you deserve it. I have some ideas on how to just make it, like the last 20 minutes, just make it absolutely a horror show. Thank you to the chat room for keeping the conversation civilized. Thank you to all the mods. Bob Carmody, thank you in the chat room. I read all your comments at the top of the show. I made some corrections. It's because of the comments, so thank you for correcting me. Is that it? What am I supposed to ask you to do? Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, thank the chat room. Okay, that's it. And something else. Oh, subscribe to my newsletter, which hasn't come out in a couple of weeks because I'm on pain medication. I think I might have another kidney stone. I think there's another one. Take care of people. That's the answer. If you're depressed, if you're lonely, if you're feeling unloved, take care of somebody else. It doesn't matter if nobody loves you. Take care of somebody else. It's very narcissistic. Why doesn't anybody love me? Shut the fuck up. Take care of somebody. When you take care of somebody else, you're taking care of yourself. Stop whining about it. Nobody loves me. Just go take care of somebody else.